everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and a very warm welcome to you all joining me at my silver pouring bench, also known as the kitchen hob, where today we're going to pour a very cool and special star for a dear friend of mine who's just had baby number 2, and we did a similar one for baby number 1, so it only seems fitting to get a second very cool looking star done for her. I want to talk about silver pouring as a hobby and a business as well, whilst we get the silver ready, get the mould nice and warm. That's, by the way, is the toppest tip I can ever give any budding silver pourer that uses graphite moulds. Preheat those moulds, because there's moisture in them. It will create molten silver steam explosions, which would not be a good thing. So make sure that you've got as much heat into your moulds as possible. Now, pouring silver though, it's a wonderful hobby. It really is the most incredible and rewarding hobby that you can do, and it can be turned into a sustainable business. The poured silver industry, I guess you could call it, has grown massively since I got started. I was almost in the sort of second wave of people who took it up, inspired by others out there that had already done it on YouTube. Hi-Ho Silver, Losing Louis, just to name a few, Mr. Zeke, there are so many. Now there are literally hundreds, if not I'd say thousands of people out there who've created incredible products and brands and wonderful things out of silver, like me, just from their kitchen hob or from their shed or from their garage. You know, there are just so many different avenues by which people are doing incredible work right now. So I would highly recommend it as a brilliant hobby, as a brilliant micro business for anybody out there that wants to try their hand at something incredibly rewarding and creative. There is no doubt that it is amazing, but it is quite a daunting hobby to even contemplate starting. So I want to give a few kind of my top tips here for those out there that might be considering getting into the game of pouring their own silver. The first thing, I'm just going to charge the furnace with a bit more silver, by the way, because this is a fairly decent sized mould and we need a little bit more. The first thing I would say is furnace is probably the best option for a brand new pourer. I got started with a whip crucible, which is essentially a ceramic crucible and a blowtorch. Like kind of this, I actually got this is one of the very first blowtorches I got, by nowhere near strong enough to melt silver, but that was a learning experience in of itself. So make sure that you have the equipment that is right for you. If you are happy to really slug it out with a whip crucible and a high power oxyacetylene blowtorch, then great. But if you want a slightly more conservative and sort of, basically what I'd say safer approach, is very much consider the likes of a furnace. You can see our kitchen in the background there. A furnace, tabletop furnaces are not as expensive as you might think. The ones that I buy from a manufacturer in the UK are approximately £250 for the sort of size that we want. I would highly recommend something like that for you. I'll try and remember to put a link to that company in the description. Please remind me if I haven't. It's called Technical Supermarket. If you just Google Technical Supermarket in the UK, you'll find them. They, being based in the UK, I think is really important, or based in the country that you are buying from is really important, because there are so many cheap and nasty furnaces made in a Far East country, which will not be named, but there are lots of really bad ones, and if something goes wrong with them, if you bought it off eBay, it's not really that great to get it repaired. The brilliant thing about the furnaces that I use is the manufacturer is in the UK. They have warranties. If they go wrong, you can send them for repair within that warranty, or, as I have done numerous times, send them back after they've conked out from hundreds of hours of pouring, and get them refurbished and brand new for a fraction of the price it would cost to buy them brand new. So that's one of my top tips. Another thing to sort of factor in though, if you are going to be doing that, you're going to be burning through graphite like there is no tomorrow. You can see in the background here, this the whole sort of board that I've got on the table is sort of stained from all of the graphite that I've used. It does burn through, and here's a prime example of a pretty much brand new crucible against an old one. They burn out the more times you use them. You usually get about 6, 7, 8 uses out of a crucible before it starts degrading to the point that you don't really feel safe using it. I have seen a few people pushing crucibles that when I see their pouring videos, I'm like, that's going to go any minute now. And of course, if you have a crucible that goes when you've picked it out and hovering it over your workbench with 1,000-degree silver in it, that's not a recipe for good things for sure. Graphite molds is another little thing I want to talk about. If you're going to pour into graphite molds, then preheat them, as I said at the start of this video. That's critical, that's really important. Otherwise, you can use things like Delft clay. I've seen so many people with so many different talents using different methods. There are so many, and nobody can really tell you the exact right thing to do. So loads of really interesting and fun things to factor in for anything that you want to try and achieve with your poured silver. I think one of the most important things is safety. That's something that a lot of people will almost underestimate quite how dangerous pouring silver can be. You see it on YouTube, you see people like myself and others pouring, and we don't tend to show you the mistakes or the serious near misses that we have. I talk about steam explosions of silver. I've learnt firsthand that is not a good thing when you get a little piece of silver bubbling out, and fortunately I've not been injured. It's always sort of flown out and hit other things on the workbench, but that's not something that I want to happen. So it's why I've had this blowtorch on now for nearly 6 minutes, trying to get as much heat in this as possible. But you just got to have a look at my kind of workbench up here. There are burn spots where little bits of molten silver have fallen out, splashed on. We've had spills, we've had a crucible failure. It's not fun, and it can be very dangerous. So getting the right safety equipment, safety gear, you can't really see it because I'm not on camera, but having a nice sturdy leather apron, get some strong kind of welding gloves, really heat resistant welding gloves to protect your hands as long as possible. If you haven't got long ones, I've not got particularly long ones here, but they're long enough to cover a vast proportion of my arm. So then wear long sleeves, deep long sleeves with hard wearing stuff if you can. Have fire extinguishers, fire blankets to hand, buckets of water ready to go in case you drop molten silver everywhere and set fire to the house. There's a whole host of different things that you need to factor in, so be very careful for that. Then, I think we're nearly there actually, because the silver is getting up to temperature. So then once you've got everything ready, you can start pouring some silver. And there are so many different methods to pour, even with a furnace. One of the methods that I use is what I call stop short method. You'll see, I don't know if I've got an example really here to show you. Let me have a look in my offcut scrap box, see if there's a good example here. Okay, yeah, so here's an example. So this is the dregs of a piece of silver from the crucible that I've poured out into a mould just to get it out of the crucible. And you can see all of this kind of graphite-y grey bit here. This is just the scum that comes from the burning of the graphite crucibles. Now that is very light, so it floats on molten silver, and it comes out at the very end of the pouring cycle when you dump all the silver out. And if you want an exact weight item, if you want to pour an exact 100 gram bar, you can put 100 grams of silver in, pour it out, and you're done. But it won't look pretty. It'll look contaminated with that graphite. You can clean it off, but it won't look how I like my poured silver to look, with gorgeous, lovely ripples, which hopefully we're about to see right now on this star. So I use a stop short method, and hopefully you'll see it in action here when we get this silver out and pour it. But basically we just hang fire that millisecond before the last dregs come out. We have the mould filled up and everything's just looking nice and clean, hopefully. So let's pour this star, and fingers crossed it'll come out all right. Sometimes these moulds will bubble at the bottom and not produce the best looking base, so we'll see. A little bit of bubbling there, did you see it? And now we can tap the mould to create ripples. These are like the signature of our brand, and this is going to be a nice one. Look at that. Ooh, gorgeous. Let's get that back in the furnace. Lovely. A little bit of graphite at the top here that you might see, but that should clean off quite happily. You can see some of the moisture still that hadn't been eliminated from deeper down in the mould. So this is the moment of truth now when we tip it out and we see whether or not it's taken the shape of the mould in its entirety. So there's a little, actually it's a fairly sizable kind of chunk there that's not come out. So I'm going to give this another try, because I always want to have the best possible results for any piece of silver that I pour and make it look as good as possible. So I'm going to charge up the furnace again, and I'll be back in just a moment and we'll make Mark II. Okay, so the silver is nearly ready to go for a second try. We're just going to get the blowtorch back on the mould. And I think it's really important just to say why we want to try again, because whilst this is a very, very pretty star, that most silver pourers out there would be very happy with. For me, I always strive for perfection, and this one little imperfection here on the back would niggle me if I was a buyer of it. So I always look at it at the perspective of what other people might think and expect, and we then pour accordingly. And if we need to re-pour, then that's what we do, and that's the commitment that I always put into our pieces to make them as good as possible. Because at the end of the day, poured silver is a labour of love. It is an expensive hobby to do, and the additional costs are passed on to the consumer in the premium that comes on top of poured silver. So it is important to try and do it as best as possible. So let's give it attempt number 2 and see if we can get this one looking perfect. A little bit of graphite there, which I'm hoping hasn't really affected the ripples too much, because those look like absolutely gorgeous ripples, and often with the little bit of graphite that has come out. And that's part of the frustration of this. Only the newest of crucibles will not really expel a great deal of graphite, if any. If we can get this, there we go. And it has taken the shape of the star, which is another thing that I was looking for. So that looks like it could be a goer. Let's give it a quenching. Hopefully the microphone picked up that quenching sound. It's a gorgeous sound, love it. Quenching, by the way, is not necessarily something you have to do for silver. You know, a lot of people will talk about quenching metals to harden them. That's not really why we do it. I just do it because otherwise it would take half an hour for it to cool down and then for me to be able to show it to you here on camera. So I can see very clearly that the graphite there has not interrupted the ripples that have formed, and you can see the difference, I think, with this particular one. So some of the graphite up here has distorted those ripples, made them different wavy lines, which look really nice and would clean up very nicely indeed. But this one, you can see they're nice and concentric, and whilst the graphite's there, a little bit of vinegar, very weak acid, will just degrade the bond of the graphite to the silver and get it all clean, which is wonderful. So I'm really happy with that. I think it's gorgeous. There's some, look at this lovely feature down here, this wave of silver. That would be the orientation I would choose for it. Lovely. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Job done. I say job done. There's so much after work to do on this now, and perhaps that will form the second part of this video, or maybe I'll probably actually do something completely different to show sort of the after work. In fact, I know I will, because I'm going to be working on some 100-gram bars for a customer next. So perhaps the next part next week will be all about the stamping of silver and those extra bits of work that we do to clean off some of the graphite and stuff like that. So that's enough for this star, because it's a very special one, with obviously it's going to have personal information and details put on it as well. So we won't be making all of the finished result public, but you guys can see what it looks like when it comes out of the mould there. Really happy with that. Look at that central cooling pool. It's just gorgeous. Wicked. Really happy with that. So that's me for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, then please make sure that you, in fact, that's going to get quite hot sitting on top of that mould, so I'm going to leave it over. Let's put it just there out of... In fact, you can't see it. There we go. So yes, if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit the thumbs up and share it around on your social media. That would be very helpful for everything that we do here on the channel. And if you would like to commission a special piece for a special occasion, then feel free to get in touch. We take orders pretty much to order at the moment. The kind of things you see here won't be listed on our website. You have to get in touch by email. That's byb@backyardbullion.com, and we can make something for you. Otherwise, have a fantastic week ahead. We'll see you on the next video. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.